Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Canadian Shield. My name is Sterling. I'm your host. There's a lot to cover in this episode. We're going to start in the Middle East, where Israel has released a statement taking credit for hiring members of the IRGC to plant an explosive in a house many months ago that was actually triggered just a couple days back to assassinate a high-ranking Hamas leader. As a result of that, because Iran is cracking down and arresting a lot of people and getting elevated into the fight with Israel properly, the United States has elected to send more troops to the region. Will this inflame? Will this subdue? It's hard to tell. There may be an ulterior motive, however, from the American standpoint. Sticking with the Middle East, Israel is claiming that they have eliminated a Hezbollah target with a drone strike of a group of Hezbollah that were going to perpetuate a terrorist attack in Israel. That is going to complicate the region even further. And I'm going to give you my understanding of why this could affect Canadians pretty profoundly. In other stories that could affect Canada, Venezuela's, I'll call him president, is still refusing to surrender control. The United States and many other countries have officially acknowledged the leader of the opposition as having won the fair and square democratic election. And as a result, the Venezuela government is proceeding with the inauguration, and they have started to crack down with some of their paramilitary groups into different buildings that are run by the opposition. In Nigeria, there is riots protesting the cost of living and the way that the government is handling the money and handling the housing and handling all of the same issues that seem to be running right across the top part of the globe. Unfortunately, the police in that region, in that country, have elected to respond with overwhelming force. All that's coming up, but before we get into it, I would encourage you all to like, comment, subscribe, hit the notification bell, share this channel with all of your socials. I have an open GoFundMe, and I have memberships if you wish to support the channel further. However, any support that you're willing to offer me, I appreciate. Okay, starting with what should actually be considered a very big wow moment. It is a humiliation for Iran and a huge breach of security. Mossad hired IRGC agents in May to plant an explosive that killed Haniyeh, says a report. Iran said to arrest dozens, including senior officials, over this. UK Daily says Israel planned to target the Hamas chief at Rassem funeral, but opted to hit him in the IRGC guest house. So the guy from Hamas was sheltering in Iran and probably, giving out instructions and all of that stuff. And Israel is claiming that they were able to convert a bunch of people in IRGC to plant the explosive and then trigger it at a time of their choosing. Of course, the explosion killed this guy, and there's a big recession for it today, and the Iranians are losing their minds over what might have happened. Now, Times of Israel is claiming that the Mossad spy agency enlisted agents from within the Revolutionary Guard to plant explosives in Tehran guest house where Hamas chief Ismail Haniyeh was staying, according to the article in the Telegraph. The report came amid news that the authorities in Tehran were carrying out a series of arrests in connection with this event, with New York Times saying senior Iranian intelligence officials, military officials, and staff at the guest house were among 24 people being held and questioned. Now, this is a very profound allegation. If the Israelis did in fact turn somebody in the IRGC, I don't see why they would admit it. However, it does make stronger sense to me that they were able to infiltrate some of there's got to be a lot of staff in that building. And I can think many occasions when people overlook the small among them. So maybe they're using this as a red herring, as a way to distract away from the fact of who may have in fact planted and triggered the explosives. I don't know. I just find it very strange that they would come out and say, yeah, we were able to turn somebody. I mean, wouldn't you want those people to be in place so that you could try to turn them again? I mean, that's what makes sense to me. But either way, Iran is losing its mind. They're cracking down, dozens of arrests. There probably some sort of factional fighting going on, that the IRGC against Hamas, or maybe they did it for the money. It's pretty profound news, however, based on the fact that as a result, Iran is now amping up its direct military for conflicts inside of Israel. That would mean that Iranian boots on the ground or Iranian fighters or Iranian missiles, instead of moving through, say, Hezbollah or moving through Hamas, they're going to be moving directly onto the border because of this humiliation that they would feel. And that's important in their culture. The fact that somebody betrayed them, a close person, that someone that was under their protection was assassinated, all of that looks really bad on the Ayatollah. All of that looks really bad on the president. All of that looks really bad on everybody. And that kind of thing in this region makes people get angry. As a result, the Americans are sending more military into the Middle East. The U.S. will send more defensive military capabilities to the Middle East. More defensive military capabilities will deploy to the Middle East to bolster forces protection for U.S. troops in the region and to defend Israel, said Deputy Pentagon Press Secretary Sabrina Singh. The deployment will be in response to threats from Iran and Iranian-backed militia. This is important for two reasons. One, the Americans that are currently in office spent all of their time saying that they were going to stop all the influence in the Middle East, right? That's how they were countering one of the pillars of the Trump administration. And now they've managed to send more people into the Middle East, what could easily be the driest tinderbox in all of the world. The amount of facets in the Middle East is beyond the comprehension of most people. Everybody sees it in left and right, blue versus red, but it isn't. It is, this assassination should point it out to you. It's like there's as many players as there is divots in a golf ball. Are the Americans hoping that they can draw attention away from the U.S. political race by sending more people into the military? Are they hoping that perhaps they'll look tough and can swing some of the Midwest conservative vote? I'm not 100% sure, but I know that right now with all of the things that are going on, it doesn't make much sense for the Americans to square up against Iran unless they are prepared to escalate. Because by squaring up against Iran, they could very well harm many of the munitions that are being supplied to Russia for Ukraine. So you see how it can really sort of snowball into something that will be global. I'm not saying to you that would occur quickly. They probably would want it to amp up closer to the election date to see if they can swing some people left or right. But it's something to keep our eye on. The press is reporting that a Hezbollah military official was killed in an Israeli drone strike in southern Lebanon. It's not really much different. The fact that they fired into Hezbollah and killed another leader of Hezbollah after having just done it a couple of days back, having gotten to some Hamas leaders on Iranian soil, having destroyed many drones on the ground in Syria. It's clear that the Israeli forces are hitting all three simultaneously, and they are now fighting a war on three fronts. And they're trying to get proactive by taking out the individuals that might be stirring up the hate. A military official with the Lebanese Hezbollah resistance movement has been killed in an Israeli airstrike in southern Lebanon, close to the border with the 1948 occupied territories. He was identified as Al-Nasser Abd Ali, a Hezbollah military officer from southwestern Lebanese town who was an active in the western sector of the border area. Hezbollah has said in a brief statement that its fighters launched a salvo of rockets at a building housing Israeli soldiers in Avimin Moshav in the Upper Galilee region. So this is only going to make the problems worse, right? Now we see that Hezbollah is officially firing out of Lebanon. Hezbollah is firing out of Syria. Iranians are moving into Syria and firing out of Syria. And Iranians are mobilizing in Iran to perhaps move it with under their own flag onto the Golan border, or maybe to try and move into Israel proper. As the Americans have sent troops there, was that political? Was that just to try and distract we know the Biden administration is no friend of the Israelis. So why are they doing it? What could be their ultimate their ulterior motive in an effort to harm what I think is the only thing that makes absolute sense is for them to be trying to get into a conflict with Iran so that they can do like they did in Iraq and occupy it for many years, move a lot of resources to their side of the ledger, as well as harm the war effort in Russia. I don't know for certain, but it's something that makes sense in my mind. This is the kind of thing that analysts would look at as a way to gain progress, right? In addition to harming the productivity for the Russians, it also harms the productivity for the Houthis, who have been keeping Saudi Arabia at bay for many, many years now, and who are driving out into the bottom half of the Persian Gulf and blowing up all kinds of stuff that is trying to flow through there and disrupting oil supplies, taking as pirates, if they can't get them as pirates, they're using, instead of drone airplanes, they're using drone ships to sink them. So there's a lot of benefit to removing the production ability of Iran. So we'll leave the Middle East and we'll come over to this story in Venezuela, the ongoing struggle of the opposition to remove Maduro from his stranglehold that he has had on the country and his tyranny that has brought the country to the brink of economic destruction. Of course, like I said, the Americans have officially acknowledged the opposition leader. I don't know that that's anything more than just, again, politics. I think that by keeping the country sort of mixed up, they benefit a little bit. They can have cheaper access to cheaper oil, because in a war, people will sell their resources for less money. However, there is a possible that it's something to go after the BRICS movement, right? Because Venezuela is strongly in the camp with Russia and China, and they may need supplies that the Americans hope can be disrupted with any kind of a civil war or civil unrest. It seems as though right now the Venezuelan dictator is holding on to some of the major metropolitan areas through the force of arms. Now, it's a very spread out kind of country, and there's still a lot to look at. But with all the reports that I've heard recently, that I read and looked at and watched, it seems that he's going to proceed with the inauguration. He's going to proceed with keeping the seal of his office. He has sent some of his people to try and just capture any of the opposition leaders, especially if they can get their hands on that woman. So now we're going to be talking about those that have the apparatus and those who do not, right? The firearms in one side and the other guy's got rocks. It's not really a fair fight. And you have to wonder who will be supplying sort of the opposition parties, if anyone at all. Will they send in munitions from a third party? Will they try to fly her out of the country? Will they intervene militarily? There's a lot of options on the table. I don't know that intervening militarily is something that they're willing to do. Again, this is a way to disrupt oil flows to China, which could be why they have elected to pick this side. I don't know. It's speculation, like I say. But I would say that I did predict that he wasn't going to surrender control, and that it's got to get worse before it gets better. Will it blow up into a full-blown civil war? That's yet to be seen. Okay, so I've saved the best for last. In Nigeria, they're having protests. Protesters defy Nigeria's bid to avoid Kenya-style descent. Now, why are they protesting, you may ask yourself? Well, it turns out that there's a cost of living issue in Nigeria. It turns out that their people are going hungry, that they're having no jobs, that they have no place to live, that everything that they have is gone up through the roof on the prices. Inflation is at a 30-year high. Does that sound familiar to anyone? Does that sound like something that we talk about happening in any of 24 countries? How can that be happening simultaneously? How can all of these countries be experiencing exactly the same issues, if not by design? That's what I want you to ask yourself. You leave me your opinion. You want to tell me that that I'm reaching, or do you think that there's some merit to what my observation has brought? I will tell you that demonstrators gathered during the End Bad Governance protests in Lagos. Nigerian troops and police tightened security in Lagos and the capital on Thursday as they prepared for planned protests over the cost of living. Africa's most populous country is struggling with the soaring inflation and a sharply devalued Naira currency after President Bola Ahmed Tinubu introduced reforms last year that were aimed at reviving the economy. Why would they be aimed at reviving the economy and then go the opposite direction? Is that them saying one thing and doing another? Is it that making a few people wealthy while the rest of them go hungry? Nigeria's cost of living crisis worsened as protests mushroomed across the nation, resulting in the grievous harm to at least 6 people. Now, I know that it says 6 in this article, but other articles are telling me it's upwards to 15 at this point in just one protest, where the police have elected to utilize their firearms to suppress the protest. And I think that's what's really important in this, to you and I as Canadians. Now we see yet another far left government, yet another socialist government utilizing their firearms to suppress the voice of the people. Now, this is what people have been warning you about for the last 10 years when everybody starts to tell you that Marxism is wonderful. It isn't. It removes the ability of the 99% of the population to defend themselves should it come to that, which is exactly what people knew in the 1700s when they said, no, we have the right to bear arms, so that the government can never become a tyranny, so the government can never push me around, the government can never bully me. The government will have to at least acknowledge that I'm in the room. They will have to acknowledge my existence. Now they don't have to do that because the government has all the power, all of the firearms, all of the explosives, all the infrastructure. And as a result, the people are in protest. The 99% of people are in protest. Security operatives grievously harmed people in another town in the north central Niger state, and a number of others were injured, the Daily Trust reported. A 24-hour curfew was declared in Borneo State in the northeast after an explosion unalived 16 people. So we've got all kinds of chaos and turmoil going on because of a cost of living crisis, because people are upset at the way that the government has led them down a path that did not give them a better standard of living. And that's something that you as a Canadian and I as a Canadian need to acknowledge. We need to see how these problems that we talk about in Canada and think that it's no big deal are actually transpiring everywhere. We need to see that if they are no big deal, how come there's so much of it going on, and how come it's taken nearly half a decade to start solving these issues and there's no end in sight? What policies is everybody enacting that it's resulting in the exact same problem? The very few getting super duper wealthy and the rest of us struggling our faces off. Now, I get that there's a big difference between RCMP in the street on horseback and this kind of stuff, but there's not a lot of difference in what's triggered it. There's not a lot of difference in what's initiating the hostility, the anger, the fear that the 99% are struggling with in their desire to just live a good life. And I would say again, I don't know why people want to lead people down a bad road. Like, if you really want to have the control, wouldn't you just keep the people happy? By keeping them happy, by giving them prosperity, they will give you back a loyalty that can never be measured. Anyway, that's just my opinion. You can leave me your opinion down in the comments. Do you think I'm being overly romantic? Do you think that I'm being naive? Or do you think that maybe there's a merit to what I'm talking about? All right, I'm going to wrap here. I want to thank you for listening. I'll talk to you next time.